Hello and welcome to Under the Superscope, where we take a look at some of the most famous games of all time and try to work out if they still hold up today. And this week we're looking at a franchise that's divided in a lot of ways. Some have always loved it, some have never loved it, and sometimes even the creators don't know what to truly focus on. So let's take Sonic apart and work out exactly what makes these games so fun and what areas they screech to a halt. First and foremost, there are essentially two forms of mainline Sonic games, momentum-based platformers and speed-based platformers. So what is the difference between momentum and speed? Well, in recent Sonic games, speed isn't the driving factor behind platforming. If anything, speed is the basis of movement, and platforming is reaction-based. We don't need to be travelling at a certain velocity to clear any of these hurdles. The point of Boost Era Sonic is this guy is really fast, and you just need to not bump into anything. When we can go from 0 to 150, the gradual build-up to Sonic's maximum speed becomes pretty much non-existent. Now, this isn't a bad thing by any means, but Sonic Team have never attempted to bring Sonic's momentum-based movement into the third dimension. Even classic Sonic and Sonic Generations is mostly not designed around momentum. Levels are littered with speed boosts and springs that control your velocity, and just like Sonic's Boost, the spin dash is a 0 to 150 button. I mean, look at this thing! Now, these games here are all orientated around Sonic gradually gaining speed with more momentum. In Super Mario Bros., we quickly reach top speed by holding down the B button, but there are many more factors to take into account with Sonic. The best way to describe it is Sonic is essentially a walking pinball, and sometimes he's an actual pinball. He'll react naturally to slopes by either needing more speed to get up them, or he'll get faster travelling down them. So we need to be travelling fast to make certain jumps or clear certain routes, but that doesn't mean we're encouraged to always be travelling at top speed. In fact, the game often incentivizes you to stop and explore. You'll find tantalizing ring placements just nudging you onto quicker paths. Or in the case of Sonic 3, you may even find a special zone. Sonic CD, in particular, is a game all about exploring, and maybe we'll get into that more another day. Sonic's capable of reaching extremely high speeds, and the game certainly has its moments where it lets you break loose, like in Sonic 2's Chemical Plant, but immediately following that segment comes a break that punishes the player for becoming too greedy. After running faster than you ever have before, you're then met with these two slow-moving platforms, and if you try to keep up your high-speed shenanigans, chances are you'll end up in the purple liquid. It gives you a chance to get out and try again, but if you continue to push on mindlessly in the next segment, you'll probably end up with the most horrifying thing that can face any Sonic player. So, is a Sonic game about going fast, but the game punishes you for going fast? Well, no. Sonic is a character capable of extremely high speeds, but all of that speed is intended as momentum, not velocity. It's how you use that speed to progress that's important, not how fast you progress. Sonic 2 will be the basis of this video, as I believe that, maybe other than Sonic Mania, it's the most consistent Sonic game that understands why Sonic moves the way he does. Sonic certainly feels similar to how he does in the first game, but Sonic 1 has a lot of flaws. For one, levels don't embrace multiple paths like the sequels do. For example, let's quickly look at Marble Zone. Now, what I like about Marble Zone is that it's slow. Sonic doesn't always have to be moving at top speed, and this is incentivized to the player from the second level in the game. Instead, we're using Sonic's momentum-based movement to traverse through tighter corridors and make smaller jumps. It's a great teaching device after the fast-paced Green Hill Zone. What I don't like though is Marble Zone essentially only has one route. There's a couple of hidden routes, but whenever you replay the game, you'll always be riding slowly on these blocks, and slowly pushing these blocks. So while I do like what it represents in terms of gameplay teaching, it's a pretty boring level. A lot of Sonic 1 levels are quite like this. In Sonic 2, when you fall off a platform, you'll likely end up in a different portion of the level and just carry on a different route. In Sonic 1 when you fall though, you have to climb up and do it all again because, most of the time, there is no other route. Sonic 1 has a lot of forced vertical platforming segments, which can be particularly frustrating in underwater levels such as Labyrinth Zone. Alternatively, Sonic 2's first water level, Aquatic Ruin Zone, allows you to completely skip the bottom water portion and stay strictly on land. What's interesting is you'll definitely clear the level faster when on land, but you'll also need to take it slower. As you can see, I'm using my momentum to travel fast, but I'm not always holding forward. And most of the time, the game gives you enough information to know when to speed up and when to speed down. For instance, a pillar rises up to bring me to a halt, which allows me to spot a higher portion of the level right here. Other times, the game uses ring placements to encourage you to stop and take another route. If you need a rhyme to remember, the lower route is the slower route. So even if you have to take a couple of seconds to build up momentum, you'll likely still end up clearing the level much faster. So let's get out of Aquatic Ruin Zone for now and go back all the way to the start to Emerald Hill Zone. It's time to work out exactly why this is a better starting zone than Green Hill. One thing a lot of platformers do right from the start is put collectibles in the air. Mario has blocks, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze has bananas, and Sonic has rings. When games have child-friendly themes, it's important to remember this may be their very first game, and having a very simple, threat-free, high-reward challenge like jumping up for some rings is a clever way of teaching them how to jump. Immediately following those rings though is another pair of rings leading into an enemy. If we jump for them, one of two things can happen. One, we jump right into the enemy and work out we can destroy them. Or two, they'll hit us and teach us about Sonic's ring system. The ring system is genius for this game. Because it's naturally a faster game than other platformers, you're far more likely to bump into more enemies. Unlike Mario, where power-ups are rare, rings are everywhere, and as long as you have one, you're fine. But a tip I have is to always explore the earlier levels in particular, and try to get 100 rings per act. Because of Sonic 2's multiple routes, gathering a large amount of rings is typically a stress-free job, and if you're playing carefully, there's a high chance you'll do it naturally. Tails actually helps a lot with this, as he mirrors your movements with just a slight delay. I really like this example here in Chemical Plant, where this enemy takes hold of you and then Tails rescues you. There aren't that many examples like this, but Tails just comes in really handy. As you can imagine, he comes in especially handy in boss battles. With Sonic 1's less complex levels, you'll often struggle to even find 100 rings, let alone try and keep hold of them. There's a risk-reward approach to rings. Yeah, you can get by recklessly because of how forgiving the life system is, but you're incentivized to hold on to as many rings as possible, both to gain lives and also access the special zones which you need 50 rings for. The hardware limitations make these stages very unpredictable, but at least you get a proper reward for finding all the emeralds, unlike in Sonic 1. Both the lesson of hitting and being hit are valuable, and things we would have learned gradually over the course of the game. But Sonic 2 does its best to try and teach every basic mechanic in this one very short area. Let's take it a bit further apart. So we start off, and we're taught how to jump, and we're taught about rings. Immediately following that though, we have two diverging paths and two instances of momentum. One's a simple slope that we just need to run up, and the other is a platforming example, which is incentivized with a moving platform and a monitor. To get up there, we have to be moving quick enough and understand how Sonic jumps. We need to be moving with enough momentum to carry ourselves up there, as a stationary jump from below does not give us enough height. We need to lend the height of the hill before it. Once we master how to jump, we're rewarded with a shield from this monitor. We may lose it immediately from the enemy above, but unlike before, this doesn't cause our rings to splatter out as we have the shield. So in this very short segment, we can learn how to jump, how to defeat enemies, how to collect rings and what they do, we're incentivized to take different routes, we learn to move and jump with momentum, and we're also introduced to shields. Phew, that's quite a lot in what's essentially a straight line with a bump. Straight after that, the multiple paths are taken in a drastically different direction. We can either be hasty and travel downwards, or if we're careful, we can make this jump to the higher portion of the level. The game actually gives you a chance to change your actions here with a moving platform. You can ride this back up and try again, so all of a sudden the player is given two choices. Do they just keep moving, or do they take things slower and explore? Remember the rhyme, the lower route is the slower route. We may have to take a little longer to get ourselves back on the top, but for doing so, we actually get the quicker path, and a new capsule being the speed shoes. Emerald Hill as a whole is a very fast zone much like Green Hill, and part of the reason for this is neither of these Sonic games natively have a save feature, so every time the player boots up Sonic 1 or Sonic 2, they're starting right from the beginning. These opening levels are an opportunity for the player to break loose and feel like they're masters of the game. They're low in challenge but have lots of areas to exploit and conquer. So why is Emerald Hill more effective than Green Hill? Well, Green Hill's Act 1 in particular sets kind of a false standard for the game. We're given an opportunity to diverge from the path and explore, but very few other levels are truly built this way. Even in Act 2 of Green Hill Zone, the two routes eventually meet up, whereas in Emerald Hill you can have a completely different playthrough to another. The multiple routes in Sonic 2 are clever for a number of reasons. They let us keep moving, they allow us to master Sonic's movement, and they make repeat playthroughs far more interesting. It's funny because they essentially both start in the exact same way and have so many similarities ranging from location to tone. In many ways, Emerald Hill is a remake of Green Hill, but with Sonic 2's more intelligent level design, it really shines far brighter, both in terms of design and, of course, the color palette. Sonic 2's Spin Dash is also put to excellent use. I've been saying how a 0 to 150 button diminishes momentum-based platforming, but that's not what the Spin Dash does. In Sonic 1, we have this famous instance where we have to back up, make sure we have enough space, and then sprint up this hill. The spin dash is basically a shortcut to that, but what makes it fairer than a simple boost is it comes with a limitation. You must come to a dead stop when using the spin dash, and even when you've mashed Sonic to his maximum speed, he still doesn't travel as fast as he does when running. It's just a burst of momentum. With the spin dash, we can clear small hills with ease, we can try exploiting our burst of momentum to make tricky jumps, or we can use it to pummel enemies. It's a very useful trick, and the fact that Sonic could kind of do it in Sonic 1 makes it feel very natural. Basically, in the original Sonic, you could curl up into a ball by pressing down while moving, and this was often incentivized with enemies in very tight quarters. In fact, revisions of Sonic 1, like Sonic Jam and the mobile-only Taxman version, actually include the spin dash, so I'd honestly recommend those versions over the Mega Drive original, though in all cases, I strongly recommend you play Sonic 2 before Sonic 1. It's just a far better game. Sonic 2 has fantastic pacing, where each level has a unique gimmick that builds upon a basic gameplay foundation. For instance, Emerald Hill was a breezy starter, Chemical Plant has the threat of purple liquid, Aquatic Ruin has the water paths, Casino Night is like a pinball level, Hilltop has environmental elements like these bridges and seesaws, Mystic Cave Zone is ominous and full of mild puzzles. It really goes on and on. Every level has something unique about it, and the fact they only last 2 acts each makes it so they never wear out their welcome. The second act always does a great job of iterating upon basic foundations, whereas Sonic 1, with its 3 acts per zone, can often feel repetitive, especially as level gimmicks aren't nearly as diverse. In fact, there's one jarring zone in Sonic 2 that kind of feels like it's from Sonic 1, and that's Metropolis Zone. It's the only level in the game to feature 3 acts, and enemy placements are more annoying than challenging. Having you ride up this slow-moving platform only to get punched down by a crab and make your way all the way back up again is never fun, especially when there's exploding stars that can do the very same thing, and this guy. I hate this guy. This zone is very lucky it has good music, as it's the only blemish on what I consider the otherwise excellent portfolio of Sonic 2 levels. Sonic 1's not only the lesser game in terms of zone variety, but the iteration of its level design is often very shoddy. Let's look at 2 recurring elements of Spring Yard Zone. These moving platforms and these rotating spike balls appear in all 3 acts of Spring Yard Zone multiple times, but what does it do to spice them up and continue to teach? Well, very, very little. The rotating spikes are a tad more interesting, as they sometimes change in orientation, sometimes they get faster. But all in all, the development of this mechanic feels random. It doesn't necessarily progress in difficulty or do more to teach the player, it just gets used again and again. To a greater extent, the same is true for these moving platforms. They never really change, yet everything I'm showing you here are from different parts of the zone. Sonic 1 does this a lot, where mechanics aren't necessarily iterated on, but rather they're just used again. Sometimes even chunks of level design feel the same to prior instances. Starlight Zone is very guilty of this. These 2 gameplay clips are not from the same point of the level. Hard to tell though, right? Sonic 2 simply feels more fresh. The pacing is rapid, ideas progress naturally, and if it weren't for parts of Metropolis Zone and the less than stellar special stages, Sonic 2 would be what I consider the perfect take on Sonic. It's fast, but it also understands that speed is an enabler of platforming, not the basis of the game. It also doesn't have as many cheap segments like this in Sonic 1's Labyrinth Zone, though instances of crushing deaths are still a thing and they can happen. There's also this infamous part of Mystic Cave Zone that just has a pit of inescapable spikes. In the mobile version, this takes you to an entirely different level that was cut from the original game, but in other versions, yeah, you're doomed. There's also still instances of enemies seemingly coming out of nowhere, like this loose cannon in Aquatic Ruin Zone, but it's something that can be memorized and mastered in later playthroughs. You don't need to play Sonic games again and again to understand them, thanks to the generous ring system and multiple routes, but they certainly become something of a comfort food when you know how to get to the fastest routes and how to avoid the more surprising hazards. And thankfully there aren't that many of those in Sonic 2, apart from maybe the first phase of the final boss. Over the many years of Sonic, the franchise has no doubt struggled, but the core foundation has always been there, and no matter what direction they try to spin it, I think most games have their redeemable factors. The adventure games may not use the same style of momentum-based platforming, but I like the fast-paced take on traditional 3D platformers. The boost games aren't about momentum, but the thrilling speeds and reaction-based movement carries them forward. Sonic's a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and so the franchise has a lot of divides and a lot of fanfare to meet. So is Sonic 2 the best Sonic game? Well, it depends who you ask, but for me, I think it's the quintessential example of what makes a Sonic game. Momentum-orientated movement and open level design that allows the player to make choices and keep moving. It may not be for everyone, but I think Sonic 2 has always been phenomenal, and it stands as a case study for why this style of gameplay works and why Sonic has always been good. So what do you like or not like about Sonic 2? Do you actually prefer Sonic 1? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more from under the Super Scope and other things gaming as well. Until next time, bye!